calculating Bitul, which relates to Simmons Chazal. I don't know if this is going to work. We're going to try. This is a new try. Okay, we talked the last bunch of times about figuring out whether something is batal based on tasting it. Okay, but most times we don't do that, as we've spoken about. We usually do not do that, and we make it cheshbonis of bitul based on shishim. Okay, and so today we're going to talk about bitul b'shishim and how we calculate that. I'm not going to talk to you about bitul b'roiv and bitul b'shisha and things that need more than shishim or things that are also mashu, but just the regular things that are bitul b'shishim. Okay, so what is like this? Most people and most companies who make things work in weight. Okay, and everything that they do works in weight, but in the din doesn't look at the weight. Din looks at volume. When we try to calculate whether something is batal or not, we calculate based on volume. Okay, so for example, if you look at this, at these here, I put here 5 containers up there on the screen, and if each of those, if that container was filled with water, so we're going to say that if this container is filled with water, that would weigh 10 pounds. Okay, but if we filled it with other things, it would weigh very different. Okay, so what I put here on the screen is if it was flour, it would be 5 pounds, and sugar would be 8 pounds, and lard would be 9 pounds, and glycerin would be 12.5 pounds. Okay, so the weight of the volume is exactly the same. Okay, it's the same container, and it has the same volume. So in din, those are all equals. But in weight, if you were making a recipe out of that, or a company is making a recipe out of that, it would not be the same. Okay, so imagine if we had 1 pound of lard. Okay, lard is treif, of course. If we had 1 pound of lard, and we had 14 pounds of all the rest of them. Okay, so 14 times 4 is 52. So we would say 1 pound of lard and 52 pounds of everything else would not be batal b'shishim. Okay, but if we did it by the volumes, and I'm going to show you in a second how we do that. If we did it by volumes, then it would be batal. Okay, it would have been 63 times. Okay, because the way calculated is not based on the weight. We calculate our things based on the volume. Okay, so when this idea that there's a difference between weight and volume, that there's such a difference between weight and volume, the scientists have a name for that. How they convert something from weight to volume. It's called specific gravity. And what they do is like this. They say is, let's see if I can. That's coming on the screen. I hope it is. It's supposed to be. No, this is not working so well. Okay, and what it is like this, and they say this. Specific gravity is that water has the status of 1. Okay, water has I just put that up too early. I'm sorry. Water has a status of 1. Okay, and everything else has a specific gravity. If it weighs more than water, then it has a specific gravity higher, and it weighs less than water, then it has a specific gravity less than 1. Okay, so in this case, if I made up a recipe, okay, I used up those ingredients that we had from before, the water and the glycerin, sugar. I can't imagine what this thing would taste like, but if we made up a recipe, it looks like this. Okay, so weight by weight, there's 2 pounds of lard, and I made up this recipe of all the other stuff that's in there. And it came out that there was a total of all the heter was 95, so it was not batal. Okay, there's only 45 times, 46 times, okay, 47 times more. Okay, so it would not be batal. Okay, but now if we it says inside 46, it says right there. Look at that. If we add in the specific gravities of the things.
Well, by weight is 43, 43.5, right?
40, no, 46.
90. Oh, well, I'm sorry, 90. 45, 46.
46. 47. Okay, we'll argue with the slides in a minute. Okay, but so that means when we say that lard has a specific gravity of 0.92, that means it's 9/10 the weight of what water has. Okay, of what water has. And glycerin is 1 1/4 times as much the weight of water in the same amount of space. Okay, so if we were to take that recipe and now use the specific gravity to make the cheshbon over here, then it would turn out we could do is we take the amount of pounds it is divided by the specific gravity, and that would tell us that. Voila. Is it working?
I have one on my computer.
You have what on your computer?
Charlie.
Okay, and it would turn out that if we cheshbon out the specific gravity of these things, so we say 2 pounds of lard of specific gravity of 0.92 has the equivalent weight of 2 and a little more, 2.17, and we make this cheshbon, it turns out that there's 135 equivalent units of heter, and the ratio is 62 to 1. Okay, so it really is batel. Now, if this was for real, if this was actually going on someplace, we would never do this. We wouldn't be soymach on that and say, oh my gosh, based on all these cheshbonis, it turned out to 62.1, it's batel b'shishim, because obviously it's very tight and very close. We wouldn't be soymach on that in lamais. I'm just showing just for the example of it to show you that we're if we did just by the weight, it would have been only 45, 46, or 47 times as much. And if we did it by the specific gravity, if we looked at the volumes of it, it turned out that it was the opposite. It was batel. Now this is, in this case, it came out as a kula. Okay, but if we change our recipe around, if my slide will work, if it will work, okay, if it does work, okay, this is not working as well as I hoped it would. So if we change the recipe around, if you really, you'll find out here's a recipe where I changed the recipe, the same ingredients, I changed the recipe, and there. Before, if we did just by weight, it was 125 pounds, so it would have been batel b'shishim. But when we did it by what's it called? When we counted in the volume, then it turned out, look, cool, it can go both ways. Okay, there's no reason why it should go one way more than the other way. Okay, so the point is we have to make our cheshbonis of bittul based on volume and not by weight. Okay, so now for lots of things that there are out there in the world, like all these things that are listed here, water and glycerin and sugar, all kinds of regular foods. You could go out there and a scientist will tell you, I know what the specific gravity is. Okay, it's out there. There's information out there that tells you what the specific gravity is for different things. Okay, but doesn't exist for everything. It's not everything, obviously. And then there's special ingredients or things that you have in the factory. So you can figure it out yourself. Okay, you can make your own figure out your own cheshbon of specific gravity. Okay, and for that is you need to have a good scale. I use a kind of scale people use for like when they're on a diet. They want to use a scale that's very fine, okay? And you get a bunch of cups that have the same size to them, okay? You figure out how much the cup weighs, so then that will count it off on the cheshbon. And then we weigh water. We fill this up with water and we see how much does that weigh. We fill it up with the other thing that we're filling up, whatever's on the powder or liquid or whatever it is. You put it in, not to pack too tightly. It's different from challah, and you smooth it off the top. And then you divide the weight of the new item that you had, divide by the weight of the water, and voila, now you just figured out the specific gravity. Okay, so for example, had we filled up a cup with water and with sugar, we would find out that the same cup that holds 14 and a little more ounces of water would hold 11.5 ounces of sugar, and that would tell us that the specific gravity is 11.5. Like is what we said, which the specific gravity is 0.8. I'm sorry, and if we did it with salt, we'd find that the specific gravity is 1.2 because it has it's higher specific gravity than water is. It's more dense than water is. Okay, so that's how we do when we make a cheshbon to say volume when we're trying to figure out volume as compared to weight. Okay, now when we're that's for that part. Now the Gemara says like this. Really, when we're figuring out whether something is batel b'shishim, if we want to say if something is batel b'shishim, so really we should say is, let's say we had a piece of meat, and it was nice and tam into a vegetable soup. So really what we should say is, well, how much tam came out of the meat? Let's say we say the meat is 1 cubic inch, and it gave out half of its tam, so there's a half an inch worth of tam in the thing. That's what we would have said, okay? Or we have even more so, we have a pot, and there's bleed coming out of the pot going into the food. So we would say, how much bleed could there be in there already? I mean, the pot is still there, so how much bleed could be swallowed into there? Okay, but the Gemara says it's not true. Okay, we assume that the entire thing's tam went over into the food, went over. So if the piece of meat fell in, and even if I got the piece of meat out, so I know that the whole meat couldn't have been dissolved into the food. It's ridiculous. It's not possible. But we assume the whole thing, or the pot, that how much bleed could there be in the walls of the pot? The pot is only so big, but we assume as big as the pot is, if the pot has 2 cubic inches worth of metal, that's how much blia went into it. Even though it's, we all know, I mean, it can't be that that's all filled up with blia. There's metal there also. It can't all be filled up with blia. But the thing is, the Gemara says we are choishes for that, and we assume we because it's too hard to make the judgment, or it's too questionable, so we assume the whole thing is done. So if so, you would think that imkain, that what happens if we're dealing with only something that's asim d'Rabbanan? You would imagine that if it's only asim d'Rabbanan, then we would say it's only a suffix how much came out. So make a hashara. Guess, let's say if the pot has 2 cubic inches of metal, you say, okay, probably 50%. I guess 50% estimate, and then suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula. That's what you would have thought. That's what you would think to say is. But it's not true. Okay, that's not really the truth. And the Bitul says I have a raya that it's not true, because that Gemara that I just told you that says that you have to assume the entire blia came out. The Gemara that says that is talking about kchal, and kchal is only asam d'Rabbanan. It's only possible b'chol d'Rabbanan. Okay, so and the Gemara the Gemara that says that you have to be choshesh that the blia came out from the entirety of it is mamash talking about d'Rabbanan. And the Ran says the pshat in that. So why taka did they do that? Why don't we say suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula? So he says is because it would just open itself up to people doing all kinds of strange things. People would make their own ideas and all kinds of kulas to come out with their kind of cheshbon of how much they think went out of it. So Chazal said, we plug, and you always have to assume the entire blia came out. Okay, so now one of an exception to that rule, a sort of an exception, is what happens if we know that a kli was only used for kosher meat or kosher milk? Okay, so and we know that let's say the thing that we made in here, the one time we made fleischiks in here, we made a soup in here. The one thing that was milchiks was the soup, and the soup was only 10% milchiks. So there's no chanan on milchiks. So the means is that the blia that's in the walls of this pot is only 10% milchiks. It's not 100%. It wasn't 100. The blia that's in there, as much blia as there is. So the pot has 2 cubic inches worth of blia, but the blia that's in there is in itself is only 10% milchiks. There's no chanan on milchiks, so the blia that's in there is only 10% milchiks. So mamela, when we want to can count out whether the blia is batel or is not batel, we don't have to pretend that it was 100%. The walls, we are choishes that the whole wall's blias came out into the food. Okay, but that whole blia is itself only 10% milchik. So mamela, we only have to be mevatel that much. Again, there was no chanan, so we could be mevatel it. If the whole thing was 2 cubic inches, we would say this is only 0.2 cubic inches of milchik that has to be mevatel. Okay. Now, this thing, there's a chiddush here that the Bitul Calculations brings from a number of achronim who say this idea that we have to be choishish that the entire blia of the food went out into it, meaning a piece of meat fell into my soup, and I pulled the meat out. I have to still be choishish that the entire size of that meat, that much blia went into the food. That idea that we have to say that. He says that is only for solids. When we deal with a liquid, then it's not true. So, for example, if milk poured into my soup, milk poured into my parva soup, and let's say 3 ounces of milk fell into the soup, and I was able to skim off 2 of those ounces. Like I saved 2 of the ounces. I could skim right off the top, and so I know that 1 ounce got diluted, but 3 ounces went in. So again, had it been a piece of meat and it fell in there, that was a certain size, I would say the entire meat has time in there, even though I got the whole meat out. But for liquids, he brings from a number of achronim.
What was this?
In Bitul Calculations brings from a number of achronim that by a liquid we don't say that. By liquids it goes completely by how much is diluted. And if 3 ounces fell in and 2 ounces come out, then I only have to assume that 1 ounce was mixed into there. And so the bitul is only for the 1 ounce, and the 2 ounces that I got out for liquids is not like that. Okay. The one more question on this issue is what happens when I have something that's a concentrate? Okay, like I have powdered milk, or I have, I don't know, some other grape juice concentrate. Well, grape juice is stam yayin, different question. Some other kind of concentrate, okay, meat stock, some other kind of a concentrate. So should you say that it's batel b'shishim as is, or should you say that it's batel b'shishim, first we have to reconstitute it? So Rebelski had a shita, and he said that except for stam yayin, it was a special din, but besides for stam yayin, he said, no, it's batel as is. Okay, you mevatel the concentrate as is. So if it's 1 cubic inch of powdered milk, it's batel b'shishim in 60 cubic inches of it. Okay, and he says, I'll tell you why. Because the Gemara says that batel v'kaflet, That means onions and leeks. They're the things that are the most nice in tam, and even they can be batel b'shishim. So the Gemara is saying that everything can be batel b'shishim except for avitul taima. Everything can be batel b'shishim.
Well, content is avitul taima.
So it's not really an avitul taima. We'll get that to avitul taima. It's not exactly an avitul taima, but he says so we could question that. So he says so the Gemara says that all foods are like that. Okay, so now I have to tell you, Dayan Weiss and Rosh Zalman both specifically disagree with Ravelsky. They don't say his name. I'm saying to say that no, it's not true like that. And there's two reasons to say why he's not correct. One is like this. The first of all is that when Chazal made this statement that butts of a kaflet are the only things that are not they're the strongest taste and they can be batel b'shishim. They looked around what they had in front of them and they said, of all the foods we have here, we have potatoes and beets and 100 foods, and they said these are the ones that have the strongest taste in them. Well, if you come up with a new food, you can't make a rule out of that thing. We have a thing that they didn't have, so we should say the Gemara meant that we can't say that. The second is bitul b'shishim is a matter of getting rid of something's tam. So the powdered milk l'chayra has all the tam of the whole cup of milk. So let's think, it doesn't make any sense. If we take four cups of milk and we can concentrate it down into 1 cup of the powder, but it has the full tam of the 4 cups. So now if we put this into 60 cups of water, you can say it's going to be batel b'shishim. It doesn't make any sense because it had four cups fell into there. It wouldn't be batel b'shishim, of course not. So why would 1 cup be batel b'shishim? Well, it doesn't really make any sense to us. The tam is. So most people assume that for concentrates you need to be mevatel it. First you have to reconstitute it. So if this 1 cup of powder is the equivalent of 4 cups of water, so first you reconstitute it, and then you pretend as if you reconstituted it. So 1 would become 4, and then 4 would be batel b'shishim. So we need 240 cups to be mevatel it. Not avitul time that needs zillions, but it would be like that. Okay. Now let's move on to a different thing, which is a little. We'll see what I take. Okay, and that's like this. The Shach says that in a regular pot, the blia that's in the wall is not going to be batel b'shishim into the pot. Okay, he says he has 3 exceptions. One is if you have a really big pot with thin walls. Okay, so then it can sign it'll be shishim in it. Okay, another one is what happens if you only use it once and you know exactly how much isser was in there. So the walls of the pot are 2 cubic inches worth of. That's how much metal there is in there. So we have to be cautious for time for all of that. But you know that the isser that you had that was in there was only a half of a cubic inch. You know the exact amount of isser that went into there. It was only used 1 time for isser. So then the blia came with it. What did you say?
Or Eina ben Yoimei.
Or the same version of that is that it's Eina ben Yoimei since you ever use isser. So the 1 time you use isser within 24 hours was a specific amount. What? Say it again? Or heter, right. But again, that's another example where you know a very specific amount of how much was in there. Let's say you use it for milchigs, and the milchigs was 20%. It was a soup that had 20% milk in it, and if in the past 24 hours, that's the only time you use it for something the wrong way. So then you know how much is in there. Okay, but otherwise, we assume that there's not going to be shishim in a pot. Okay, that's what the Shach says. The Pri Megadim goes 1 step further. Okay, this that the Shach says there's not going to be shishim. He says, and you should know that a standard pot, okay, you could expect to be 30 times the content of the pot will be 30 times the blia. Okay, that's the blia that's in the wall. The Pri Megadim is an extension of the Shach. The Shach doesn't say how much it's going to be. The Shach says it's not going to be shishim. Okay, so the Yehuda and the Marsham say I don't know what to tell you. He says. When we made the cheshbon, it came out to only about 6 times. We made the cheshbon, it only came out to about 6 times. Okay, and yeah, the blia in the pot connected the doif nekli. They said it came out to be 6 times. And I looked on a map. They lived like 100 years apart from each other, and they lived all around the same places also. So whatever it is, obviously they talk about different pots. This is not a halachic shayla. This is a Matthias question. Okay, so. Then I realized that here, when you think about it, there's machlekes going on. He says 30 times, he says 6 times, because obviously they were looking at different pots. So it's not a shayla and din, it's just a shayla of how to look at it. I said, you know what? Well, our pots probably have nothing to do with their pots either. Right? They're making an estimate of how much is going to be the blia. Our pots and their pots have nothing to do with each other. So I decided I should look at our pots also. Okay. So before I tell you what I found, I'm going to tell you I have a few just like ground rules. First of all, is what we're going to say here is just to be an estimate. Okay, just give you a feeling like the Prima Garden is saying, he's going to give us an estimate. He's not telling you to do something exactly based on that. Okay. Second is my cheshbon that I'm going to tell you. The cheshbonis I'm going to tell you are going to assume. I'm going to assume if this slide works, that it has a flat cover, just because calculation-wise that was easier. In truth, usually pots have a domed cover. It's like a little of an angle, which has a little more metal. Okay, that's not such a big deal. Next is my cheshbonis did not count all the pieces that are attached. Like over here, we have the handle that's welded on that really counts towards the shishim. I didn't count those. Okay, that's also not such a big deal. But most importantly is my cheshbonis that I'm going to tell you are assuming the pot would be 100% full with food, which just says this pot is treif, and I put into its soup up to the very top. Is the bli in the pot batel b'shishim, or how much is it batel into the thing that's in the pot? But if the pot had only been 80% full, then our cheshbon is going to be all wrong. If we think that the blia in this would be batel, let's say we think it's batel b'shishim, but now we only put it 80% full, or we batel 30 times, we only have 80% full, and we have to cut down. The blia comes out from the whole pot, and the it's only being batel into a less amount of heter, so then our cheshbon is going to be wrong. Okay, so now before I get Ramash into my pots, you'll see in my second I have a bunch of ideas about pots. The general rule is going to be like this. The bigger the pot is, the better chance, the higher the ratio is going to be. The closer we're going to be to shishim. Okay, and the second is that the thicker the walls are, the worse the ratio is going to be. Okay, those are two rules that are pretty obvious. Okay, so now let's look like this. Okay, I came out with 1, 2, 3, 5 kinds of pots nowadays. Okay, you wouldn't believe, but there's all different kinds of pots. Okay, and it goes like this. Let's see my slide going to work. Okay, stainless steel pots. Okay, that's probably the most common pots that people have is stainless steel pots. Okay, stainless steel pots. This is a stainless steel pot. Whoops, sorry, I jumped ahead. Sorry. Can I go back? Doesn't let me go back. Doesn't let me go back. Okay, so you're gonna have to let me just show you both of them at the same time. Okay, stainless steel pots are the most common, I think are the most common. They are be'erach 0.6 millimeters thick. Okay, I've been measuring pots and reading up about them also. Okay, and what it is like this: if you have a smaller pot, what I write here on the chart here, 2 to 8 quarts, that's like a regular house pot that you use in your house. The ratio of blia to the tam is 37 to 1 or 56 to 1. Okay, so way more than what the Prima Garden was saying to us that it's going to be 30 times. It's going to be way more than that. Again, depending on the size of the pot. The bigger the pot, the higher the ratio is going to be. What happens when you have a stock pot, a stainless steel stock pot from 10 quarts to 80 quarts, like in a really big pot? Okay, this is not this pot. This is what this is. 4 quarts. This is 4.5 quarts. Okay, so we're talking about a really big stock pot. Then in fact, about the b'shishim, the blias are 60 to 80 times the ratio. Okay, just from our estimations. Okay, that's for a stainless steel pot. Now, usually you could tell if you have a stainless steel pot. This is not a good example of that. Usually you could tell because stainless steel is ferromagnetic, meaning it touches to a magnet. This is a special kind of stainless that doesn't. But most stainless pots, if you put a magnet onto it, it'll attach to it. Okay, it'll stick onto it. Then there's aluminum pots. Okay, this is probably not what you have in your house, but a plain aluminum. What happened? I lost my page here. A plain aluminum pot. Aluminum is cheaper and conducts electricity better than stainless steel, but it's not as strong or as rigid as stainless steel is. So most people would not use a plain aluminum pot in their house. Okay, what you usually see plain aluminum pots is like in yeshivas or in a commercial kitchen, have these really big pots, these really big ones. So for the benefit you get of having the aluminum, because it's cheaper and conducts heat better, is kadai. Those pots are very thick. Okay, relatively thick. They're 4 millimeters thick, way thicker than this stuff. Maybe 8 times as thick as them, way thicker. And for them, it's like this. If you had a smaller stock pot like them, like 12 to 16 quarts, the ratio would be about 10 to 1. And if it has really a huge, like a monster size one that's 80 quarts, the ratio would be like 19 to 1. Okay, so this is a little closer to what the Pri Megadim says, but maybe closer to what the Marsham said. Okay, so it's not shloshim; it's be 10 or 19, depending on where we're holding it. Okay, now, but those kind of pots are. I lost my cursor. Those kind of pots are more common, not so common at home. It's not such a common thing. You could buy cheaper aluminum pots. They're not so common. Let's see if this slide moves now. Okay, now what is now the next group is called clad stainless steel. Okay, these are very expensive pots. Okay, people have, but they're very expensive, and they are. If you want to get a pot that has the strength of stainless steel, but you want it to have the conductive heat like aluminum does, they make a pot that has 3 layers. Sometimes it has 5 layers, but it has 3 layers, and the layers are aluminum, stainless steel on the inside and the outside that gives you the strength, and on the inside there's a layer of aluminum. Okay, it has this extra layer of aluminum. So the stainless steel makes it strong and sturdy, and the aluminum is what conducts the heat better. And those are called clad or tri-ply pots. Okay, those tend to be someplace in between these numbers, about 2.6 millimeters. So those are relatively thick. If it's a small pot, like a 2-quart pot, the ratio will be 8-to-1, and if it's an 8-quart pot, the ratio will be 13-to-1. Okay, so way worse than what the Pri Megadim says, more along the lines of what the Marsham and Yad Yehuda said. And the truth is, I'm probably not going to give you the gory details, but the truth is that in those days they used cast iron and they used bigger pots. Good chance that their pots were more like this thickness. That's the truth. Okay, now there's a variation of. I don't know if this is going to work. There's a variation of this, and that is if you have I told you before that aluminum pots are not so common, that people would use plain aluminum at home, again because it's not so strong, and but what people use something is called anodized aluminum. That's what this pot is. Okay, this pot is anodized aluminum. Okay, this pot is, and often they come in interesting colors because the anodizing, it makes the color easy to take color on, and this is an aluminum pot. Okay, it doesn't stick to a magnet, and what it is this pot, because when they anodize it, makes it firmer and makes it that it could then take a color. That's on the outside. I know it's dirty here. I'm sorry, but it takes color well, and then on the inside it tends to be Teflon coated. Okay, so these pots tend to be between 2.2 and 3 millimeters. Are all different types over there, and the ratio of Bitul is 7 to 15-to-1. Okay, so again, not such great Bitul numbers over here. So if you look at this whole chart, I'm not finished. I'm almost done of these things. I skipped one. Okay, on these charts, in most of these things, it's not nearly like what the Pri Megadim said 30 times, except when we get to the stainless pots, which is in fact pretty common ones that people use. In those ones, we get closer, even better than what the Pri Megadim had said. Okay, there's another type. For this, I don't have numbers because it very much depends on the pot, and that is this pot that I showed you before. That's stainless. Remember I told you there's something as clad pots. Clad pots mean that there's extra layers. Well, there are people who put a layer just on the bottom. If you look at this pot, on the bottom there's an extra, like a bump here, an extra disc put on the bottom of the pot, and this disc that's on there is meant to spread heat better. Sometimes it's also used if you want to use it on an induction stovetop. So you have a pot that can't work with induction, but this will make it able to work on induction, and this also spreads heat. So it's a cheap man's clad pot. Okay, this is not clad all the way. It just has an extra layer, just literally like welded onto it, just stuck on this extra layer that's on here. So then that throws off your cheshbon as a bittul, because the pot itself might have had, I don't know, we said it was a stainless pot. It might have had 37 times as much to be mazel. It could have done that, but all of a sudden we have this all extra metal that has to be added on into our cheshbon. Okay, so everything I just told you is all about cheshbon. There are other pots. There's copper and cast iron and ceramic. These are what I found to be the most common and normal ones. Okay, now I'm not going to tell you, but if you want to read my papers, now we heard all kinds of things about bittul. So what happens when we were trying to make our cheshbon bittul? Or how did I make these cheshbonis? So I'm going to tell you just the short version. I'm not going to tell you all the gory details. Okay, the short version is like this: if we have this pot and we say, okay, this pot was used for treif, and then it was used for something kosher. we want to make the cheshbon of Bitul. So the short version of what we do is we figure out the volume of the content of the pot, and then we figure out the volume of the entire pot. Okay, and when we subtract one from the other, it tells us how much metal is in the pot. Okay, so if this pot, I'm making up enough, this pot is 4 inches diameter, and the walls are a quarter of an inch, let's say, then we make a cheshbon of the volume with it being just of the 4-inch diameter, and we make another cheshbon of the volume with 4 1/4 inch diameter. Okay? And the difference between them is the metal that's in the pot, which is the blia. And so then we say, now we know how much blia there was, and we know how much content there was, and now we can compare one to the other. Okay, so all the rest of these pages that I got here are to help us figure out the different formulas. If it's a round pot, if it's an oval pot, if it's a tank, different kinds of ways, different things we have to make the math of how to do that. But the short version of what we're doing is that we're figuring out the content and we're doing making a cheshbon of the volume of the inside, and then we're making a cheshbon of the volume of the outside, and the difference is the metal, and then we compare that to how much the content is. Okay. Now, all the things we said now, again, you could hear examples if you read my examples if you want to. All the examples we have now have to do with pots. But as I said to you at the beginning, as kalim get bigger and bigger, then the chances of them being bottle is better and better. And it happens to be that on like an industrial level, the kalim are made with very thin metal. Okay, relatively very thin metal. So it turns out that when you work with very big tanks, like we just dealt with someplace, that had very big tanks, we had a cheshbon if there's bitul, there's not bitul. So then, in most cases, you can end up with bitul. In most cases, when the tanks get really big, it'll be what the shach says when the chushtandak, when they're really thin metal and the pot is very big. Well, that's what we have. You have this huge tank that holds 30,000 gallons. So then that's a huge tank. And again, they made nowadays this very thin metal. Chances are that those are going to be bitul. So I'm not gonna bore you, but all I here's one of my examples. When we have trailers, a lot of people know that trailers. We know that the tom that's in there, tom that's below in the walls, is bottled like 100 times to 1 in things that are carried in the trailer. Okay, that's it.